this. But in order to make that jump, you have to be able to gather enough materials for this new class.
Yeah.
Be able to immediately get to that point right away and then do the content and then make the jump.
Yeah.
It is a pretty good time, yeah.
Yeah. Maybe save some mats once you're done enhancing your first character, and then have that for the new class that comes out, and try to catch it up then with those mats and then make the jump. Okay, so now that, that was just a quick rundown of how alts work in the game, and that maybe you shouldn't be too worried about having to pick the right class off the gate, because I know it's a lot of pressure for a lot of people, and I don't want to, scare people into making the wrong decision. But I do want to inform you about your decision, because I think that's also important. So a lot of people come from other MMOs, and they talk about, is the game a Holy Trinity game? And the question I always hear is, like, are there healers in the game? Or is there direct healing? Can I be a healer? And my representation of the game is that, well, first of all, it's not a Holy Trinity style game, but I always say that healers in Lost Ark are a lot more like Discipline Priests from WoW. If you've ever played a Disc Priest in WoW, you kind of know what I'm talking about, is that to provide buffs and utility to your team, you have to deal damage to get that mechanic working in the first place. So maybe you could give the people listening an idea of how the class system works in the game, and what that Holy Trinity is like, or how it exists within the game, how do supports benefit their teammates, is there direct healing, and so on.
Okay, so first of all, Lost Ark borrows a lot from some of the other Korean MMOs in the space, where it's pretty much just support and synergy, and that's it. So you have your support classes, which their role is to provide shields, attack buffs. That's their most important role. And then in emergency situations, heals. And we'll come back to that in a second, because that might sound weird to people who are coming from Holy Trinity games, which are used to like topping players off after every single attack and everything. Synergy refers to everybody else, all the damage dealers, and how everyone has, a little buff that they provide to the party, but otherwise their only role is to deal damage. And that's the only delineation between the two. You have the two support classes, Bard and Holy Knight, and then you have everything else. And the normal party format for basically everything in Lost Ark is one support for every 3 damage.
God damn it, man! I always forget my
drink.
drink.
Sizes are 4. Raid content is 8, but that's 4 and 4. And in this game, whenever you provide a buff to your team or put a debuff on a boss, it only applies to your party. And so, the optimal formula has come down to 1 support, 3 DPSs. Outside of that, there's no tanks. There are tanky classes, and then there's a class that has a taunt, but it's not a real taunt. And really, the taunt on that class, which is the Gun Lancer, it's mainly used to interrupt the boss patterns. So it's not your traditional holding aggro. Aggro tends to be random in this game.
Yeah. I do think, though, if you are a tank player from WoW, you'd probably like the Warlord or Gun Lancer.
Oh yeah, I'll appreciate it.
Yeah, I think you'll vibe with that. So if you were like a person that, just know that like you're not sitting there. You would like to position in front of the boss, right? A lot of frontal attacks. What is the term for it? I always forget the term. It's like head attacks. So a lot of head attacks, and then you want to be there to counter. So you will be kind of positioning in front of the boss, and you can kind of just tank a lot of mechanics. So I think if you are a tank player, you would like the Warlord. And I do think if you like playing, support-based classes, you can still have a lot of fun. Someone that played a support.
I never play support in MMOs. I have a Bard alt. It's one of my favorites to play.
Yeah.
There's something about playing a Bard that it feels like you're running a daycare.
Yeah.
You're watching the little DPSs do their thing, and you're like, oh, little Jimmy, don't stand in that attack.
Yeah. You'll ping at them to stand in your heal. That happens a lot.
Yeah.
But,
and I do want to talk about the heals real fast,
Sure.
because again, since it's not a Holy Trinity, it's really important that people know that healing is really limited in Lost Ark. And so if you're going into the idea of playing a support, you have to be cautious with knowing that it comes with a caveat that healing is not easy. You always have to, it always comes with a condition. In the case of Bard, if you're healing, you're not giving damage buffs. You have to choose between the two. And if you're a Holy Knight, you can't give burst heals. You can only give heal over time.
style heals, yeah.
Yeah, so for the most part, people depend on
shit,
potions
man!
if they
My
mess
buttons
up,
are all
because
messed up. Sorry, guys.
Lost Ark is a
There
game
we go.
about
I'm
dodging.
good.
it's action combat. So if a boss does an attack, almost always there's a solution to not getting hit by it. And so heals are basically something that only happens when someone messes up. Whereas in other games, there's heal checks and stuff like that. That doesn't exist in Lost Ark.
Yeah, having a support is insane though. And also, to touch on the pot thing real quick.
Guys gotta stay together.
You're limited usually depending on the encounter that you're doing, and they're also expensive. So when I started playing the game, I was ripping pots, dude. The active ones, the ones that, they're expensive. Like you don't want a pot, so I won't do certain content, even though it's doable without a support, because I'm a cheapo. I don't want to spend any of my gold on...
The Founders Pack, it has a bunch of potions,
Yeah.
and people are going to burn through them while leveling up without knowing just how valuable those potions actually are.
I did that. I was ripping purple pots when I was leveling. Like, don't do that.
I was dying on the inside.
Don't do that. Don't use those. Save them. If you're going to take them, save them. But yeah, having a support is super valuable, and you'll have a great time finding groups. Doing some of the solo content might be a little bit annoying, but not so much. I mean, I've been doing a lot of Holy Knight Chaos Endings, for example, and it's just fine. And then doing Guardian raids, I always do them as a group. You can't solo them, but it's more.
It's never recommended.
Yeah, I mean, you can do them as a DPS and it's fun, but as a support, you'll definitely want to get groups, but you'll have no problem, for the most part, finding groups as a support. I'm assuming
basically every region, there's never been enough supports.
Yeah.
And
I do think though that we're gonna have a lot of DPS Holy Knights.
I know. I feel so bad about it because in every marketing material for the Holy Knight, they make it look like he can DPS well.
They have it.
Alright, don't get
I
caught
don't
in
know if
fire.
people will believe this in or I'll cut it out. What does it say here? I don't care. What do they say about the Paladin? Paladins have a direct line to powers of the gods, channeling their ancient might to potent offensive abilities and defensive moves. It's just it seems like they do big damn. And you can do some damn, but you're not there to do big damn. So if you're looking to play a rep Paladin, the Holy Knight probably ain't it, but...
Unfortunately, there's no DPS meter, so you'll never know that you're entering.
Yeah, you could just... Well, you won't be in the feather portion. Okay, so really quickly, I want to talk about the difference between melee and range. This is the second time we're recording this. I know that in a lot of MMOs, a lot of players find that range is a lot easier to get used to, like boss patterns, mechanics. Usually you can see a lot more of the screen, but in Lost Ark you have this overhead view, so everyone kind of shares the same viewpoint for the most part. And I know for myself, I started the game as a melee and found range to be a bit more difficult than some of the end game raids, but I know that's something that you wanted to touch on. So how does melee and range differ based on the tier between tier 1 content and tier 3 content?
Okay, so I mained, and it's not as funny the second time around. I made a Berserker. I made a Berserker, and then recently Sorceress came out. I love spellcasters in MMOs, any sort of casting kind of class, so I made that transition from melee to ranged. So for the better majority of my time playing the game, I played as melee, and I always found that the initial part of learning content is very difficult. Because, a class like Berserker, it's a high commit class, it's very slow and sluggish, and it's very susceptible to getting hit by stuff. And among all the warriors, he's also technically the squishiest. So, Berserkers in Korea, there's a meme about them.
Yeah, I've heard this meme already now, yeah.
You're either a boomer who's floor POV, or you're the Giga Chad that carries raids and MVPs by a mile. And it's 95% the first one and 5% the second one. And so, they tend to die a lot because it's you're learning content. But in tier 1 content, bosses are very slow, they're very meticulous, and it's not that bad for melee. And ultimately what Lost Ark comes down to, and this is probably, if you think about it, it's the truest thing. Once you learn content, you subconsciously think to pre-position in certain ways the moment you see a boss.
I have a reminder for AP.
So that you have the most amount of time to do damage back, or to get in position for a positional, or really just to get in a few attacks before the boss does whatever it's going to do again. And in the first part of learning
No way,
content,
even
you
in
don't
the
know any of this
fucking
stuff.
zone.
So,
Fucking
you
shit.
really scramble to find out when you can attack the boss. But once you've done it for like hours and hours, the boss like blinks and you're like, okay, it's gonna do this, this, and this, and I can move right here, and then I can get all my attacks in without getting hurt at all. And that just comes with experience, and that's like the deal with melee. And in the case of range though, range is like, I'll just stand out here and just chuck a few fireballs and stuff. But even in the case of ranged, because of the way the boss does its attacks, so many bosses have attacks that are easier to dodge in melee range. So a lot of the times I find my sorceress, even though she's a range class, I'm playing in melee range regardless, just because if I'm playing in range, I'm gonna get hit by a cone or something that has a half-second telegraph that's impossible to dodge if I'm, too far away.
Yeah, I found my experience going from melee to range, realizing I don't like range at all. But that's because I played a gunslinger. We'll get to that class in a minute. But yeah, so melee and range, different play styles, obviously. But I think they're both really fun in their own way.
Yeah, they're both very viable too. I mean, I've had no problem MVPing on either of them.
I'm the 95% for sure on the Zerker, dude. It's hard. But we'll talk about that as well. We'll talk about Zerker and difficulty in a little bit. So with all that melee and ranged, picking a support, picking a DPS, let's talk about really quickly before getting into what touching on the classes themselves. Let's talk about party buffs, utility,
Guy's gonna die in fire. Come
overall
on, guys,
damage,
really?
because not every class that does the most damage is that damage isn't everything. Right? Utility is a big part of the game. I learned that early on with just the pyramid skills, for example.
So stupid. I mean, stop fighting in the fire.
Which class brings damage buffs, which class brings ability buffs, things like that. So this is something that I would like to learn even more about, even though I've been learning a lot about it. Can you break down the importance of party buffs, utility, and damage, and how those differ amongst classes?
Alright, so, among the highest level of content in the game, sometimes people ask, okay, why don't you bring this class that, it's known as, why don't you just bring all of that class, and then, 2 supports? And what it pretty much comes down to is that having a mixed set of party buffs that can stack with each other will usually have a much greater bearing than having just a class that's strong. There's raw strong. And different classes bring different things, enough so much to the point where there's not really any classes that are left out. So some classes like Warlord or Sorceress or Destroyer, they have fantastic destruction, and there's certain mechanics in the game, especially in the late game, where you want to have destruction just because there's checks where if you don't do it, the boss becomes significantly harder. Or there's the case of neutralization damage. You play Berserker, it has one of the highest neutralization ratings in the game, and you've seen how basically every raid boss that you've encountered in the end game has some sort of neutralization check. And I'm not just talking about the end game in tier 3, but even in the lower end game, you remember Rohendel, it was the same thing.
Yeah, it was fun.
So people have to learn really quickly about the importance of neutralization. There's different kind of party buffs. There's party buffs that are up all the time. There's party buffs that are really powerful, but they're only up for really small windows. And those are called burst synergies, where you have to time them with everyone else when everyone else has their stuff, as opposed to the small buffs, which are just you apply it and you don't have to think about it because it's up all the time. And so people who pick those classes need to be mindful that if you pick up the burst synergy, it's very reliant on knowing when you should use them. The boss goes down, or the buff uses their buff, and you always time your buff based off of their buff, since they're the support. So it's something to keep in mind when you make that choice, what kind of synergy you're working with, and what kind of traits your skills have. Even something so much as counter skills, which is a more advanced mechanic of the game for beginners. They've recently added parryable attacks on all of the lower level content, even though we're past it now.
Yeah, I've seen some of the Guardian raids, yeah.
So all the players from NA and EU, they will go through all these contents where there's parryable attacks that they can do now, and it's something to know that certain classes have better counters to parry those attacks than others as well. So there's all these different little nuanced things that you need to take into consideration about the class beyond is it ranged and how much damage it does. It's all these little extra factors.
Yeah, I'll have a document down below. I think I have one with all the different synergies and party buffs. And does your encyclopedia that you have online cover all of this or no?
Yes.
It does. So I'll have that linked below. Saint has like an insane just overview of the game in general. So I'll have that linked below so you guys can kind of look through some of these if you're interested. To give you an idea of how some of these work and which classes have what. I think I have something as well. So, okay. So with all that in mind, I wanted to give you a rundown of just how classes differ from one another in terms of just like in general in the game. But I really wanted to touch on this point because it's something that I noticed a lot come into this game. So if you're at least from WoW and a lot of other games too, it's not just WoW.
I'm watching
a
YouTube for a different game.
Space. There's just like tier list Andes and just what's the best class, what class does the best damage, which one's the best between these two. And I wanted to talk about the importance of really picking what you like versus picking what's the best or what do you think is the best. Because that stuff can kind of just change overall. Maybe you can share a story based on your experience. I think Sork is an example of a class that was really insane out the gate. Or got buffed and was insane, then got nerfed. And just making sure you pick what you like. But more so I want to talk about, we'll get to that as well, but bring the player, not the class.
Guys gotta run, you gotta take off. Gotta be very careful. 17's waiting.
The class that was insane, and people swap over to it, then it gets nerfed, and then maybe you feel bad about your decision.
This has happened so many times in the last year already, where something meta appeared that would just seem so insane, and everyone flocked to that class. I can count 4 situations off the top of my head already. There was the case of Summoner at the beginning of Season 2, which just seemed so powerful because all the content was new and it was a shift of systems that oriented towards living in raids versus doing damage. And Summoner was just so versatile at that. I mean, we'll talk about that when we talk about the class itself. And then she ended up eating nerfs. She had multiple nerfs, actually, multiple patches in a row, and all the people that rolled Summoner, all of a sudden, they didn't feel great. Then there was the case of Soulmaster, and Soulmaster is this hilarious class that's basically Goku from Dragon Ball Z. And there was an engraving called Initiative at the time, and the way that Initiative works, I actually meant to tell you about this engraving because it makes Chaos Dungeons super fun. The way it works is that when you hit an enemy that has max HP, the attack is a guaranteed crit, and it gets up to 160% additional crit damage. So it's an opener attack, and in Chaos Dungeon, it would just obliterate everything on the first hit. You don't even need crit chance because everything's a guaranteed crit. But previously, it used to work on bosses. So what people would do is they would take a Soul Master, just buff the living hell out of her, and then she would open the fight with a Spirit Bomb. And there were all these videos floating around of like bosses dying instantly in one hit. And then there was the most extreme case of Reaper, a class that's not in NA in EU right away. She was so overtuned at the gate, and it coincided with the huge population boom with Lost Ark, so all the new players that came in, they were like, wow, this class is insane. They all rolled Reaper. And then Reaper took like a 30-40% nerf in a single patch. And all of a sudden, people didn't feel so great about it anymore. It's like a Avengers meme. And, people dropped out of the class, even though today she's extremely competitive still, and they didn't change anything. That's how much that nerf was warranted. So, all these stories, it's basically saying how people flocked to a class and then found out that after it was adjusted, because Smilegate does these adjustments fairly regularly, several times a year, in fact, you can't just pick off of meta. You have to play something that you genuinely like. It even happened with Sorceress. Sorceress, there were so many of them, and now there's so few because she beat nerfs, and she's just kind of frustrating to play.
Yeah. I think that's something that, although it's maybe a bit easier to get ults going in this game, and it's not too punishing in making ults, I think it's important to play what you like. Because for me, as a player that's been playing for a couple months now, and I've been going through all the raids in the game and trying to do all the most difficult content I can do, I've never once thought about like, I don't want to break this class. I don't want to take this class. It's much different than my experience playing WoW. It might be similar to Final Fantasy, where it's bring the player, not the class. So,
well, what is it like in WoW? Are there builds that are just straight up dead?
Oh, this is so many classes that are straight up dead. Yeah, there's classes that are just dead for sure.
How many? I mean, I haven't played WoW in 14 years. How many classes are there now even in that game?
Well, the specs are like their own classes as well.
Yeah, it's correct.
Or something, I can't remember. But there's a handful of classes, but just be looking for, alright, like, we need damage, I want to fire mage. Okay, what the best team? I'm looking for disc priest or druids, or disc priest and paladins. You don't want to bring anything else in. So, in this game, it's just not like that. I mean, maybe,
You'd be surprised. I think people will be very surprised to see that, like, for a game that has like over 20 classes and there's always more coming in, it's surprisingly well balanced.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So don't worry too much about that and just play what you enjoy, for sure. I think that's going to be as cheesy as it sounds, and it's like, oh, just play what you like, man. I was the guy in WoW telling people don't play what you like. It's a rip. I would say that in my videos because you're just not going to play the game. But in this game, I honestly think you can just kind of play what you like. So.
Yeah, and this is also really important for people that are coming in from games like Path of Exile, by the way, because anyone who plays like a seasonal game like that, you take like a couple months off in the game when a new league starts up, you're on a blank slate. A Lost Ark, though, it's a long-term game. You're building up the same character for literally years, so you really have to make sure that you like the idea of the class more so than its capabilities.
Yeah, it'll change over time, right? The class might go up and go down. So.
Even if it's not based off patches, it could be like, oh, they introduced a new gear set, and all of a sudden DPS part is viable. And it's like,
yeah, the sets are important. We'll talk about that in another video. Okay, so let's kind of hop into just keeping all of that in mind into the classes themselves. So I'm going to try my best to not spend too much time on each class, but I'll give you some insight on what I've learned playing with these classes, how they vary in PvE, PvP content, and yeah, just give you an idea if that class might be for you. So we're gonna start with the warrior first, and we're gonna talk about the classes that will be out at launch. Okay, not the classes that won't be out at launch, but ones that will be out at launch. So for the warrior, we have the Holy Knight, the Berserker, and the Warlord or Gunlancer. We have the Paladin. I'm gonna mess these names up because I'm not used to them, but yeah, it is what it is. The names aren't that great in my opinion. Some of them aren't good, but whatever. So Paladin first. I'll give some insight for really quickly. That class in particular was the one that I really wanted to play because they look like Chads. The picture of the.
Did you think it was a DPS?
No, I didn't think it was a DPS.
Never did.
I learned early on
Full 17.
watching a tier list.
And then there's one
That's
from
another game that I learned that there were supports.
Okay.
But I'm a support kind of guy, so the Holy Knight in PvP is absolutely insane. That's why I started playing the game. The class is nuts, right? Like they're so
them fight,
strong.
Man. Let them fight.
Their shields are so valuable in PvP and also in PvE content as well. They're more about peeling for sure. That's what I've learned as well. But you can definitely add some damage. So if you like being an offensive support, at least in PvP, you definitely get that vibe from the Holy Knight. And in PvE content, they're very fun to play.
I mean,
some people would say that they're boring,
crazy.
but those are the people that I would say don't like playing a support. I enjoy supporting my teammates. I enjoy adding utility to the group and saving people if they're about to die. So I like the Holy Knight a lot. It's a really strong class. What I would say though, overall, maybe this is not a fair statement, but I do prefer bards a little bit more when I'm going through content I haven't.
They're just going back. You guys gotta kill the lady. They're just gonna keep going back and getting.
The heals are not. The Lucio heal does not feel as powerful as the bull.
I can't play this fucking game anymore. I really
Very
can't.
tiny. Whereas the bard
It
heal,
builds up.
yeah.
Unless you play with 17s,
So, yeah,
it's just the
the
same
Holy Knight's
shit
really
every
fun.
game. I don't know how this is fun. I don't know
I
how you guys
definitely
actually
enjoy
have
the
fun
class,
doing this.
especially for PvP. But what do you think about the Holy Knight? And who do you think?
Nobody wants to try a good game. I don't
Holy Knight
understand.
is
This
for
is crazy.
people who want to be like a buff power.
The
Just
fuck
moving
is this
around
world
pretty
coming
much.
to, man?
If you want to feel like a badass while also like dishing out buffs, Holy Knight's a good
What
choice.
the
I mean,
fuck
in
is this
terms of
world
support,
coming to?
especially some of y'all pick based off of like even gender. And
Yeah.
so if you want to play a guy support, Paladin is like right up your alley. The Paladins also, in general, he came out way later than the other classes.
Oh, level
his
5.
general
Oh, that's
design and
good.
aesthetic is gorgeous.
Yeah, it's
Level 5.
Everything looks and
This is what
sounds
this game
really
has
cool
come
with
to.
him. And then in PvP,
I can't stream this
as
shit
touched on
anymore, I
before,
can't.
He's a very offensive support.
Shame.
We should just mention this in general, but in PvP, the supports can also actually dish out a reasonable amount of damage because of the way that the skill sets are designed. It's not like raiding where supports really struggle to put out any damage, so they just focus on support.
Fucking shame.
In PvP, their
Fucking
skills can
shame.
actually chunk another player pretty hard because everyone's on an even playing field without things like engravings and whatnot. So yeah, Paladin is a really good choice. I will say that with the caveat of Paladin,
Yeah,
though,
it's all box fucking
he
ladder.
does not start with his support awakening.
Oh, this game is so
He
bad.
has to item level 400 and do a 4-hour-long quest in order to get that shield awakening. Whereas cards start.
I'd rather play the
support
fucking
awakening
Sims
right
than
away,
this
so you'll have to actually play with your DPS ultimate skill for a little while.
Unless you're gonna be the rep paladin, then you're chilling. You know, just go out there with the big damn awakening.
Some people listen to 4-hour quest.
I'm just gonna be a rep paladin, man. Yeah. So they're really fun though. Honestly, Holy Knight's gonna be one of the classes that I play. I've enjoyed it a lot, and I think if you're someone that likes playing an offensive healer, you'll really like the Holy Knight. And the class armor sets look great.
You mentioned that some people prefer playing with bards, and on prog content, I prefer playing with Holy Knights.
Really?
Because they will always heal you. They don't have to make that choice between healing and DPS buff, and they have a cleanse. Bard does not have a cleanse.
Yeah, that's true. That is true. I also don't have to stand in that specific spot. They don't have to yell at me to ping to stand in this little circle. So that's also.
Yeah. Bards tend to be a little bit pushier.
They are. They ping so much.
A little sassy.
One ping is fine. I heard it. The ping system, whatever. Okay, Zerker Berserker. This is the class that I didn't want to play.
Both of us play this. Yeah.
Both of us play this. This was a class that I didn't want to play. I don't want to spend too much time on it because it is my class. I don't want to be biased, but I wanted to be a Holy Knight. Ended up playing the Zerker, and the Zerker, in my experience, is everyone said it's going to be an easy class. It was not easy. I was lied to. The Zerker is slow and clunky.
Box Larry's running around.
But
This is
it's
what
all
this
about letting
fucking
your
game
burst
is coming
windows.
to.
However, it feels much better. Like I'm sure all classes do, but in particular,
Guys,
it feels
smart
so
enough,
much
man. Go and look at
Just
these
using my
games. I'm
sets,
telling you,
my
play some
runes,
real competitive.
higher amounts of specialty. Somewhere I
Not
guess the
this
Holy Knight
garbage
felt
that
so
they-
much better.
There's
but
like
it's
no
in PvP
excuses
as well.
in these games. Why
It's
wouldn't you
definitely
guys
not going
want
to be
to
the class
play
that you
these
think you're going to
games?
run in there and just deal a lot of damage. But again, you're similar to the Holy Knight. You're kind of waiting for people to initiate so
And
that
it's
you
the
can
cool
initiate
high.
because a lot of your openers are a bit predictable, in
Are
my
you done?
experience.
It depends.
I'm
a little
sorry
bit,
if I bitched
depending
you.
on like the quality of players you're playing against. That's
Oh,
why
yeah.
They call the Berserker the noob stomper
Yeah,
class.
for sure. Yeah, that's
Yeah.
so true. That is so true. Because early on, you can just steamroll. I think early on in NA, Zerker will be crazy off the gate.
Yep, you will.
But I think when you get players that are, it's just so easy to see what the Zerker's going to do. It's the same opener, same finishing skills. So, yeah. Overall, I think the Zerker's a great class, but I don't think anyone should fall for the idea that it's this easy class to play. Because I personally don't think it is. Because you're just, the slower you are, the harder it is to deal damage, and you have to really know your burst windows. Is that a fair generalization?
Your experience would have been very different if Madness was available right from the get-go.
Oh, yeah.
Just to explain to people listening, Madness is one of the class passives that was recently buffed in Korea. So Stevenson hasn't had the opportunity to experience it yet. But that build, it's vastly different from the build that he played.
I miss most of this shit.
Yeah, there's classes that are just dead, for sure.
How many? I haven't played WoW in 14 years. How many classes are there now even in that game?
I can't remember off the top of my head. Well, the specs are like their own classes as well.
Yeah,
There's
of
a huge
course.
difference. I mean, maybe to 12 or something. I can't remember off the top of my head. But there's a handful of classes, but I would just be looking. All right, like we need damage. I want a fire mage. Okay, I want the best healer. I'm looking for disc priests or druids or disc priests or paladins, for example. You don't want to bring anything else other than that. So, in this game, it's just not like that. I mean,
You'd be surprised. I think people will be very surprised to see that like for a game that has like over 20 classes and there's always more coming in. It's surprisingly well balanced.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So don't worry too much about that and just play what you enjoy, for sure. I think it's going to be as cheesy as it sounds, and it's like, oh, just play what you like, man. I was the guy while telling people don't play what you like, it's a rip. I would say that in my videos because you're just not going to play the game.
You guys went up
But in
here.
this game, I
Bars
also
to
get
get
people
fucking
what
healthy.
you like.
Yeah, and this is also really important for people that are coming in from games like Path of Exile, by the way, because anyone who plays like a seasonal game like that, you know, you take like a couple months off in the game, and when a new league starts up, you're on a blank slate. A Lost Ark, though, it's a long-term game. You're building up the same characters for literally years, so you really have to make sure that you like the idea of the class more so than its capabilities.
Yeah, it'll change over time, right? The class might go.
Yeah. Even if it's not based off of patches, it could be like, oh, they introduced a new gear set, and all of a sudden DPS part is viable, and it's like,
Yeah, the sets are important. We'll talk about that in another video. Okay, so let's kind of hop into just keeping all of that in mind for the classes themselves. So I'm going to try my best to not spend too much time on each class, but I'll give you some insight on what I've learned playing with these classes, how they vary in PvE and PvP content, and yeah, just give you an idea if that class might be for you. So we're gonna start with the warrior first, and we're gonna talk about the classes that will be out at launch. Okay, not the classes that won't be out at launch, the ones that will be out at launch. So for the warrior, we have the Holy Knight, the Berserker, and the Warlord.
This
and
game
Gunlancer.
stink.
Holy Knight, the Paladin.
Smarten up, guys. Hopefully, you guys look into Lost Ark, cause
Yeah, it is what it is. The names aren't
This
that
game
great,
is
in my
buggy.
opinion. Some of them aren't good, but whatever. So Paladin first. I'll give some insight for really quickly. That class in particular was the one that I really wanted to play because they look like Chads. The picture of the
did you think it was a DPS?
No,
17
no,
net.
I didn't think it was a DPS.
Green.
Because I learned early on watching a tier list. Because I came from
God.
another game that I learned that there are supports.
I don't even know how I do it
Okay,
sometimes.
okay.
Pop.
But I'm a support kind of guy, so the Holy Knight in PvP is absolutely insane, and that's why I started playing the game. The class is nuts, right? Like they're so strong. Just their shields are so valuable in PvP, and also in PvE content as well. They're more about healing for sure, that's what I've learned as well, but you can definitely add some damage, so if you like being an offensive support, at least in PvP, definitely get that vibe from the Holy Knight. And in PvE content, they're very fun to play. Some people would say that they're boring, but those are the people that I would say don't like playing a support. You know, I enjoy supporting my teammates. You know, I enjoy adding utility to the group and saving people if they're about to die. So I like the Holy Knight a lot, and it's a really strong class. What I would say though, overall, and maybe this is not a fair statement, but I do prefer bards a little bit more when I'm going through content I haven't done before. I'm not sure if that's a fair statement because the Holy Knight feel that the heals are not, the Lucio heal does not feel as powerful as the Bard heal. And I'm
Because it's so small, you don't notice it.
yeah, it's very tiny. Whereas the Bard
It
heal,
builds up.
yeah. So the Holy Knight's really fun, and I definitely enjoy the class, especially for PvP. But what do you think about the Holy Knight? Who do you think it's for?
Holy Knight is for people who want to be like a buff power, just moving around pretty much.
Yeah,
So if you want to feel like a badass while also like dishing out buffs, you know, Holy Knight's a good choice. I mean, in terms of support, especially some of y'all pick based off of like even gender. And
Yeah.
so if you want to play a guy support, Paladin is like right up your alley. The Paladin's also in general, he came out way later than the other classes, so his general
unfucking-playable.
design and aesthetic is
I mean,
gorgeous.
it's unplayable.
Yeah, it's-
Everything looks and sounds really cool with him. And then in PvP, as you touched on before, he's a very offensive support. We should just mention this in general, but in PvP, the supports can also actually dish out a reasonable amount of damage because of the way that the skill set is designed. It's not like raiding where supports really struggle to put out any damage, so they just focus on support. In PvP, their skills can actually chunk another player pretty hard because everyone's on an even playing field without things like engravings and whatnot. So
yeah.
Paladin is a really good choice. I will say that with the caveat of Paladin though, he does not start with his support awakening on launch. He actually has to get to item level 400 and do a 4-hour long quest in order to get that shield awakening.
Yeah.
Whereas Bard starts with her support awakening right away, so you'll have to actually play with your DPS ultimate skill for a little while.
Unless you're gonna be the rep paladin, then you're chilling. You know, just go out there with the big damn awakening.
Some people are listening 4-hour quests.
I'm just gonna be a ret paladin, man. Yeah. So they're really fun though. Honestly, Holy Knight's gonna be one of the classes that I play. I've enjoyed it a lot. And I think if you're someone that likes playing an offensive healer, you'll really like the Holy Knight. And the class sets like great.
You mentioned that some people prefer playing with bards and on prog content. I prefer playing with Holy Knights.
Really?
Because they will
Terrible.
always heal you. They don't have to make that choice between healing and DPS buff, and they have a cleanse. Bard does not have a cleanse.
Yeah, that's true. That is true. I also don't have to stand in that specific spot. You don't have to yell at me to ping to stand in this little circle. So that's also
Bards tend to be a little bit pushier.
They are. They ping so much.
A little sassy.
One ping is fine. I heard it. The ping system. Okay, Zerker Berserker. This is the class that I didn't want to play.
Let's play this. Yeah.
Both of us play this. This was a class that I didn't want to play. I don't want to spend too much time on it because it is my class. I don't want to be too biased, but I wanted to be a Holy Knight. Ended up playing the Zerker, and the Zerker, in my experience, is everyone said it's going to be an easy class. It was not easy. I was lied to. The Zerker is slow and clunky early on, but it's all about landing your burst windows. However, it feels much better, like I'm sure all classes do, but in particular the Zerker feels so much better once I started getting my sets, my runes, higher amounts of specialty, similar I guess to the Holy Knight, but it felt so much better. But it's in PvP as well. It's definitely not going to be the class that you think you're going to run in there and just deal, like, you deal a lot of damage, but again, you're similar to the Holy Knight. You're kind of waiting for people to initiate so that you can initiate, because a lot of your openers are a bit predictable, in my experience.
It depends a little bit, depending on like the quality of players you're playing. That's
Oh,
why
yeah.
They call the Berserker the noob stomper.
Yeah,
class.
for sure. Yeah, that's
Yeah.
so true. That is so true. Because early on, you can just steamroll. I think early on in NA, Zerker will be crazy off the gate.
Yep.
It
will.
But I think when you get players that are, it's just so easy to see what the Zerker's going to do. It's the same opener, same finishing skills. So, yeah. Overall, I think the Zerker's a great class, but I don't think anyone should fall for the idea that it's this easy class to play. I personally don't think it is.
You guys can't be that's what happens. You guys wander other places, and then this is what you
Is
get.
that a fair generalization?
Your experience would have been very different if Madness was available right from the
Oh,
get-go.
yeah.
Fucking
Just
stop
to
wandering
explain to
all
people
over,
listening,
man.
Madness is one of
Stick
the
with your
class
fucking
passes.
team. You notice how every one of those 17s were right next to each other?
To experience it yet, but that build, it's
Fucking
vastly
tools,
different from
man.
the build that he plays, and it removes a
Look,
lot
look,
of that
whole
clunkiness
team.
in exchange for always being at low HP.
All together.
So that
Look.
just goes in to touch on a completely
All
different
together.
subject that, different classes, they can be played in different ways.
Fucking
that
retards, a level
different
2,
ways
and you're
to
trying to go off on your own.
To
I'm
your
confused.
assessment, it is very true that the typical and meta
Fucking
and known Berserker
retards,
build,
man. This
it
is
is
sick.
it has a downtime window where it feels terrible. But when he's in his Berserker state, when he's like red and glowy and crazy, you feel invincible during it. It's
Yeah.
crazy.
It's really good, and I think we can touch on this too with the upcoming classes we have for the past two. How it will feel in tier 1 content versus tier 3 content. And yeah, a good statement on that is that when you get more specialty as a Zerker, certain stats will change your class in different ways. You get to stay in that state longer, your runaway state of
Yeah, my last game.
where you're all glowy and stuff like that. So the class feels a
Time
lot
for me to
better.
stop
It
playing
scales,
some
it feels like
games.
really
Yeah,
well
it's
over
terrible.
time. So Zerker, I think, fantastic class, really fun, but don't fall for the
Guys,
idea
just
that it's
fucking
easy.
trolls that do whatever you want.
Yeah, it'll feel okay in tier 1 where things are like pretty tame. It gets harder.
Okay. Warlord or Gunlancer? Same class. I love playing with this class. Why don't you talk a little about the Warlord or Gunlancer? It's my favorite class to keep up with.
It is the
can't
odd man out because it's the only. First of all,
Okay,
it
I
doesn't.
can't. Thank you.
people
Now
look
I
at it, they're
see.
like, oh, it's
Everybody
a tank.
fucking here.
He's a DPS. He's a DPS that can also flex into the role of support, and he's the only class in the game that can do that.
So I'm done
Depending
talking.
on
It's
the way
like
you
nobody
play
pays
him,
fuck attention. They
he
just say whatever they
sits
want to
in
say.
attacks and doesn't
fucking
care about
insane.
mechanics. For the longest time, we've called him the most OP class in the game.
Yeah.
Because he's just good in every content. In the case of PvP, it's a little bit different because his kit did not, I guess, age well against a